So my mom was a power user. We were fortunate, cognitively sharp as a tack, played tennis till she was 87, but by 90 she had gone blind due to macular degeneration. That's actually my mom and my sister. She became isolated, lonely, lost her independence. I'm the youngest of a very large family, and we tried to figure out what to do. And then when the Amazon Echo first came out back in November of 2014, we gave my mother the Echo for Christmas. Because at that point, she was 80% blind, 90% blind, in that range. A little bit of periphery. She took to it like that. Opened her whole world again, and it was immediate. So we started thinking, this could be a business, but more importantly, we wanted very unique things, specific things that were unique to us and our family. So I decided, it was September of 2015 that Amazon opened up its third-party development. And if you remember, if you had an Echo way back in the beginning, when you asked Alexa what time it would say 2:35. And I remember pinging them going, please add AM or PM, because my mother was blind and got up in the middle of the night one time thinking it was afternoon. So we built an Alexa skill we called Marvy, Ask Marvy. And Marvy is my mother's name, actually. And we wanted it to do very simple alert notifications and family messaging based on what was capable. There were very few dev tools back then. We over-engineered it purposely and accidentally. You would think a simple notification like sending an I'm okay message would be very simple. But when you're dealing with aging or older adults, they're rarely your only audience. You also have to take into consider, how do I design for a family member? How do I design if there's a caregiver involved? So we decided to build something from the voice of the user to a centralized portal where a family member could manage configuration of everything in one place instead of setting up 15 triggers with IFTTT. And then extending it to a mobile app for the family. Now, we did this back in 2016. We did it for two reasons: to meet people where they were at the time, and so we could collect user behavior data, because we knew we were very early. We have a very big vision for Marvy to be the place to go for very specific solutions for older adults. We also have a platform, a community platform, that we're building so that we can connect older adults to their local communities. It could be senior living, it could be their home health agency, et cetera. So that's kind of what we've been building. But we knew we were early. And having been in technology early adoption before several times, there's different business revenue streams you can capture. But we wanted to understand really how were older adults and family members really possibly going to use Alexa or Google. Google wasn't out at the time. But we're a software platform, and we will be agnostic to all of them. So we've now trained over 10,000 older adults, family members, and care teams. We have a lot of information on how they use it. It's been invaluable. From figuring out what your intent will be, how to do error management when you're building and designing a skill. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those types of things. But first, how many people know an old person? All right, anyone here have an elder parent or grandparent? Yeah, so even if they're healthy, my mother was very healthy, took an aspirin a day, was playing tennis at 87. But she lived on her own in Florida while most of my family was in Boston. You still kind of want to take care of, right? So through these trainings, we realized that I learned more about aging than actually I ever wanted to know. During this 3-day conference, 30,000 people have turned 65 in the US, because the boomers are in that area. There are 3 generations over the age of 65. The greatest generation, it was by far the politest generation, was incredibly excited when Alexa came out with the follow-on mode, because it now said you're welcome when they said thank you. All right, then you have the silent generation, and then the boomers are now coming out. So when you're talking about designing for aging or older adults, you have to really understand who they are, because it's not one broad block of old people. All right. This is a 91-year-old gymnast. And by the way, the 85-year-old and up age group is the fastest growing age group in the United States. And a lot of times we don't market to the older generation, but we need to be aware that it's a group that we need to. First of all, there's going to be care involved. Most of us think of this: blue hair and walkers. And there is a segment there. So as we're going through this, and I want to make sure I leave lots of time for questions at the end, if you're thinking about designing for the older generations, the older populations, family members, assisted, senior living communities, you have to really look at the subsegments that make up the over 65, because there are 55 million people over the age of 55 just in the U.S. There are 44 family caregivers, unpaid family caregivers. And most people don't identify as a caregiver. We're just helping mom, right? So there are chronic diseases. And what voice does for older adults in its early stage of this first generation is simple things become difficult with age. We don't see as well. If you lose your vision, dialing a phone becomes difficult, finding things. We get a little creaky. I happen to be a boomer now. So conditions do come up, and simple things become difficult. Voice brings back simple. And it doesn't need to be a complex solution. The simplest thing makes a difference. So there's chronic conditions that are very common and are opportunities to develop and design and help. This is one of the few times we as a community get to build a business possibly and do good at the same time. Social isolation is a huge issue. More than 25% of those over 65 identify as isolated, and that affects health. So how do you use voice to kind of connect the older adult who lives by themselves to their community or their family or their care provider, and even to health care? At Marvy, we're not working on health care. We're working on wellness and staying connected. This is what most over 65s are. We're living longer, we're living more productively, we're living healthier, we're active. A 10-year-old today is predicted to live to 104. So we have to look at aging differently. But this age group, over 65, spends 70% of owns 70% of the discretionary money in the U.S. 50% of CPG spend is spent by this age group. So where are they spending it, or where do they want to spend it? Because when you're thinking about how do I design for them, other than a medical reason, where will I find traction possibly? They like to travel, and a lot of times that's towards family. They like to explore because they now are at a point in their life where they can, so they'll go to places they haven't been before. Okay. They like to learn new things, whether it's online, whether it's Tai Chi, whatever it is. And they like things that have purpose, causes, spirituality. Okay, so these are all segments of opportunity, especially in early adoption. I have to step back because I talk with my hands, and I'm hitting the mic. So these are areas of opportunity. We can't talk about older adults without talking about caregiving, family members. With Marvy, which we're going to actually put on soft suspend soon because we're completely rebuilding and adding additional features. We send out thousands of I'm okay messages every single day, where the Marvy user just says, ask Marvy to send I'm okay, and a text or an email goes to the family member contacts that they've added. Now, again, you think that's a simple action, but you've got to be able to, how do I onboard a contact? Okay, I have to let them verify also. How do we take that process from the web and have an older adult do it just via voice? The first year Marvy was out, part of our testing was we had 100% of the signups were by a family member for their elder parent or grandparent. In the last 6 months, that's up to 84%. The older adult is signing up themselves, which is great. So family members a lot of times are kind of watching over an older adult, and they're also bringing up their own family, so they're running two households. So how can voice help with, beyond what's my schedule and connecting to your Google Calendar? What if mom needs orange juice? So she says to Alexa, add orange juice to my shopping list right out of the box, right? So if you're on a shared household, the family member could see that notification on the shopping list, correct? Well, what if that family member isn't the one who does the shopping for the parent? It's a black hole. So there are little minute gaps that we can fill and then design for. So really aging is a journey, so you want to kind of again, meet them where they are and roadmap them forward, because there are constraints based on the technology. We've seen from working with 10,000 plus users and trainings and family members, there's 3 areas. There's sending alerts to providers or family members that I'm okay, check on me, visit me, those simple type of interactions, which from a design standpoint is not just connecting to Twilio. You have to figure out how to add a contact, have them verify. There's a kind of a different design flow there. And then tasks, I need more orange juice, I need hearing aid batteries. How do you manage that order happening either through Amazon, being distributed to family members? You really have to think, what's the goal in mind? And then information, what's around them? Most older adults, when they start using Alexa, start asking for, how do I get things that are possibly within reach, because they don't want to call someone to come help them. That's where smart home integration is helpful. I really want to talk a little bit about adoption. So when we first launched in 2016, it was just simple notifications. But we wanted to see, how do we get them to engage? How do you go from a utility to adoption to engagement? How do we personalize the interactions? Because mom to me is grandma or aunt. So how do you personalize the older adult, and how do you personalize the contact? But also, how do you personalize the voice to them? So we did tests where we would send the I'm okay message. We'd say, okay, the morning beacon's been sent. And then we had subgroups, and we'd say, hey, remember that Alexa, ask Alexa to play Frank Sinatra. We would do humor that was tied to their generation. If anyone is old enough or you're not, ask your parents if they remember The Honeymooners, and which was a popular TV show for the greatest generation. So we would prompt them to have another engagement to test where they wanted to go. When we did trainings with older adults and there was a table full and they would ask for a song, let's say they asked for a Broadway song. It's the most important thing that happened was for us to listen to the side conversations, because someone inevitably would start to tell a story based on the song they heard. So it teaches from a design standpoint where your intent might go offline. Play a Broadway song. Somebody go, oh, remember, did you ever see such and such in Radio City Music Hall? Well, that's really important to understand that might pop in as a error management and then an error opportunity, so that you then add that to a follow-on on one of your just simple notifications. So it's really about connecting them as we progress, because we're in first generation. So when you're looking at older adults and you're designing, what's the goal in the first place? Is it a notification? Is it to connect? Is it to relay information? Is it to collect information? Who are they? What generation are they? Who else might be involved? Is it is there a family member that has to be part of your design circle as far as a notification, which is extremely common unless you're building, Jeopardy, that type of game. Humor is imperative when you're designing for older adults. Understanding what makes them laugh because they remember it creates a memory of a phrase. They like to say that's a hoot. We know that phrase. We don't really use that phrase today, but that older generation does. When you look at onboarding, when you're designing, even just enabling the skill, you have to take into consideration who is enabling the skill. Is it the older adult? It's usually not. It's usually someone else is setting it up for them, which is fine. But if you want to personalize your interactions down the road, at some point you need to ask what's the older adult's name? What's their nickname? What do they go by? So all of that is craft. You have to really think through as you design a skill for an older adult. Adoption, like I talked about, think about how to drive adoption. And just natively out of the box, the first thing any older adult should do, or anyone should do for an older adult, is attach a light, and the bedroom light. Because they all pretty much get up in the middle of the night, and fall prevention's a big thing. And it helps them start to use Alexa or Hey Google every day. When you're looking at personalization, you have to look at it a couple different ways. How do you personalize their name based on what feature or what service or what you're crafting? Do you need to use their real name? Do you need to call them, be aware they're a mother or a grandmother? Do you need to choose a male-female profile? So you have to really think about, we have found that the old generation prefers a male voice. That's the generation that grew up listening to the radio, which were mostly male voices. That's the generation that all they had was conversation. They never learned how to do this. That's the generation that taught all their children how to write, that they had to write handwritten thank you notes. So they know how to converse. They converse in full, complex sentences, too. But they will interrupt you. How do you handle, in the middle of something, Alexa, I can't hear you? Is that going to throw it back to Alexa and out of your skill? Yes. So how you instruct them when they interrupt you has to be done up front. If you don't hear me well enough, if you need me to repeat, say these things. That's part of your error management that you start to map out ahead of time. And then it becomes an opportunity to redirect them back to the original purpose of the design. Does that make sense? And then really bring in the experiences. There's so many, when you look at the full breadth of the ages, 65 to 100 and something, there is a segment that is going to be voice only. They are not going to be multimodal. They don't have a phone today because they can't see it and they can't use it. They are voice only. They will purchase first. The over 65, when I talked about travel and learning, that screams to me voice commerce. When Saturday Night Live came out with the skit, I think everyone's probably seen it last year, that was either really funny or it was greatly offensive to older people. I looked at it as, it's Saturday Night Live. Oh my gosh, it's going to go to mass market. It was a great sign. So you have to be aware of perceptions. We have to eliminate, they don't prefer the word senior. People don't prefer the word caregiver. It's better to say older adult. It's better to say, those who assist them. So those little phrasings are important. Also, if you're going to develop or design for an older adult, be aware of the longevity economy ecosystem that exists, because there's a lot to be learned about that type of phrasing that's available, and they're very free with their information. Aging is often about a moment of joy that makes their whole day. I think in the keynote yesterday, and I had seen it before, a 93-year-old, even in an assisted living, because they're still just in their unit, said they can go all day and not talk to anybody. So being able to talk to Alexa is just life-changing in a very day-to-day moment. We have seen massive adoption in the older market. I mean, I'm singularly focused on it because I think it's important. I think it's a business opportunity, but to be honest, we're not talking about technology. We're not talking about business. We're not talking about scale. We're talking about mom. We're talking about dad, and how do we help them? And as our country has become more dispersed, where families more remote, we have so many opportunities as a community to help them. And that's really what it's about changing. So think of design for older adults has to be smooth. You have to recognize Alexa talks too fast. Google talks too fast for them. So you have to really plan your pauses, and it has to be very simple and short, your phrasing. You have to expect them to ask you to repeat. The low registers of the voice assistants are very hard to hear. We find that, and I always recommend, if you have a choice of getting a Dot or an Echo, please buy the Echo. It's louder. So sometimes when you start from an AI perspective, you have to say, are they asking, I can't hear you, what, many times? Then ask them how far they are from the device. All that's part of design. There's such an opportunity here to do good. So I hope, a little bit of insight in a very short time. So let me open it up to quick questions. I know we're basically out of time. Any questions? Yes.
Oh, you brought up something that I've heard a couple of panels here, and that is the concept that because a command for Alexa pulls the person out of the skill, it really alters the user experience and the way you have to design the user experience. Do you see that as a technological flaw that Alexa and Google and whatever other people need to do to come up with? Do you see there'll be a way to kind of keep people intelligently inside of a skill? How do you, as the person experiencing the difficulty, if I made you in charge of Amazon today, what would you want to see differently about how it either redirects?
I was in charge of Amazon?
Right, well, this part of it. Let's just say that.
All right. Great question. I think I think it's going to evolve very quickly, and most of the issues will be addressed. I think right now everybody's in that phase of you have to say a wake word, but things are happening as little as follow-on, which keeps the session open, which then you don't have to say the wake word again. I think we're going to see an evolution. I'm not overly concerned about it. I really wanted to note it more because I'm really not. Because if you can design for older folks with hearing and some vision and those type of things, we should be designing for all because we're all aging. But if you can kind of master the nuances of designing for older adults, it's much easier to design for all, in my opinion. And we need storytelling and interactive games. And Marvy's going to be a platform not just of notifications, but we're going to have multiple skills, all very specific to helping that. But I think we're going to see that evolve. But again, please make sure upfront instructions on how to do things and to set expectations that it doesn't do everything. which we kind of need to do with everyone. So great question. Yes?
No, what you're talking about is skill-based, but is there anything on the hardware that
I can speak to a couple things. I made a conscious choice not to build a piece of hardware because I want it to me, it was important that an older person has access regardless of what the device or form factor is. Specific to caregiving, things like that, there's the Jibo robot, there's LEQ. LifePod has a virtual caregiver. They also have some patented technology about the wake word, where they will ask for medical management, things like that. We're watching HIPAA compliance and how Alexa and Google are handling HIPAA with their voice clouds before we even come close to the line. Our mission is more about social isolation. I think, as you know, we've seen such acceleration, such improvement in noise reduction and microphones and proximity awareness and location based and which device are you closer to. That's just going to continue to evolve. I believe that for the most part, the device, Alexa and Google are going to be everywhere, and then you've got Cortana and some other devices. So I don't know if that answers your question, but there's devices that are coming out that are specific to do companion type things for older adults. But from a hardware technology, I'm not a hardware expert, so I'm an innovation expert, so I've seen a lot of what's happening for older adults. Yeah, and a lot of it's if your site, again, there's two sides to it. You have an older adult and you have a caregiver. We had a setup where in the very early days before Amazon closed this loophole, we set up a mom's light, right? Everybody knows how to name a light. Well, we set it up at my sister's house. So my sister lived 45 minutes away from my mom. So my mom would get up every morning and say, turn on mom's light, and it would turn on at my sister's house, and she would know my mom had gotten up. So it's more figuring out, it's not so much about the technology, it's what's the simple need. A friend of mine who has a homebound parent, but they want their privacy and they want to control their independence. They set up red, green, and yellow lights. So he works from home. So if the mom needs something, she says, turn on the red light, and the red light turns on in her son's office. So he knows to get there. So we're in the rudimentary beginning stages. I think we're going to see a lot evolve. There's a lot going on in voice analysis. Think about healthcare where you start to really analyze the patterns and the timbre of an older person's voice to detect Parkinson's, to detect early stage dementia. Think about the stories we can tell for early stage memory loss. So we're in the very beginning, and there's a lot of opportunity to help. So, any other questions? Because I know we're over. Yes. Is the next group? Is there someone else in here? Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll keep going if you want me to, or you can. Yes.
From the people who are thinking about getting involved in this space or evaluating companies who are, where do you think are the new areas of focus for risk, safety, and security? What should people be thinking about from that perspective? Risk to the older person, risk, liability, liability.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know, is there anyone here from a senior living community? Okay, so there's a lot of pilots going on in senior living. And I've actually lived in 3 senior living communities. And I was part of Brookdale's Entrepreneur in Residence program. I was part of Front Porch's pilot. They're still figuring it out. So a lot of us who are early in this, development of solutions are asking a lot of questions. We have a feature called Check on Me. We had in 2016, we had every senior living community that was looking at what's an echo, because people were still learning what an echo was, did not want to use the check on me phrase because of liability. Because, did it make them liable? So we changed the phrase during the pilot. The same notification went out, but that we changed the phrase. So I think from a legal standpoint, a lot of policies are still being written. I think a lot of things are still being figured out on how to do the asset management of app deployment and onboarding, things like that. Most are staying away from, because most of what we're doing, we're in stealth mode. Other than putting a skill out 2 years ago and collecting data, we've been building in stealth mode because we knew, we needed to observe the market. I think others are doing the same thing. So we don't deal with, safety. We're not a PERS where, we're not replacing the bracelet and the pendants. There are some solutions out there that are tying it to their call center. But from an endangerment, I don't know what specific safety scenarios you're speaking of. Because if you're talking about PHI, personal health information, we're still in the early stage. And how do you know who else is in the room? And yes, we're doing voice profiles now. But, if you're going to go down a path that touches on certain things, you need to design more discovery questions before you capture that information.
But maybe well, it's just something to think about, things like authentication.
Oh, yeah, from a security? Yeah. Those are good points. I mean, even adding contacts, we don't allow a message to be sent unless the contact has double authenticated, because they're not the ones signing up. So just like if you're legally required to opt in with mobile, you need to opt in with and have those same protocols.
So maybe the designer ought to be thinking about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Are you doing anything with people who have abnormal communication? So people who suffered from stroke and are in recovery?
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be a segment that cannot use voice yet. But we're working with, I'm trying to decide what I can say. We're working with a pilot group of mild stroke. We've worked with, training-wise, a lot of Parkinson's. So, and again, we're in that stage of how do you use Alexa and an awareness of that, and then collecting information on what can make it simple for them again. So yes, the answer is yes, though. Other questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate it. I hope this was helpful.